Hello, Gospel Voice community. We are excited to continue our exploration of the incredible life of Joseph with this in-depth biblical study. If you haven't yet seen our previous video, my name is Joseph and this is my story, we highly recommend you check it out first. The link is in the description below. Narrator: in this new video, we will delve deeper into the story of Joseph, examining the biblical text and uncovering the profound lessons his life has to offer. From his early days in Canaan to his rise to power in Egypt, Joseph's journey is filled with trials, dreams, and divine providence that continue to inspire us today. One of the most powerful lessons we learn from Joseph's early life is the importance of trusting in God's plan. Joseph was deeply loved by his father Jacob, and this special affection was symbolized by the coat of many colors that Jacob gave him. However, this favoritism bred jealousy and hatred among his brothers. In Genesis 37:5-7, we read about Joseph's dreams that foretold his future rise to power. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." These dreams were a sign of God's plan for Joseph's life, but they also intensified his brother's resentment. Despite the animosity he faced, Joseph's faith in God's plan remained steadfast. His dreams were not merely the fantasies of a young boy, but prophetic visions of what God had in store for him. Even when his brothers betrayed him and sold him into slavery, Joseph continued to trust that God had a purpose for his life. As believers, we too must trust in God's plan, even when our circumstances seem dire. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Joseph's story encourages us to hold on to our faith and trust that God is working for our good, even in the midst of trials. Joseph's early life teaches us that God's plans are often beyond our understanding, but they are always for our benefit. His experiences remind us that we are part of a bigger picture, one that God is carefully orchestrating. Like Joseph, we must remain faithful and trust that God is in control, guiding our steps and fulfilling his promises. In the face of jealousy, betrayal, and hardship, Joseph's unwavering faith in God's plan serves as a powerful example for us all. It encourages us to trust that no matter what challenges we face, God is with us, working everything together for our good and his glory. Joseph's time in Potiphar's house is a profound lesson in integrity and faithfulness. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, Joseph found himself in Egypt, purchased by Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Despite his dire circumstances, Joseph did not let bitterness or despair take root in his heart. Instead, he chose to trust in God's plan and remain faithful in his service. Genesis 39:2-4 tells us, "The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned." Joseph's hard work, integrity, and the favor of God upon him were evident, leading Potiphar to trust him completely with the management of his household. In Potiphar's house, Joseph demonstrated exceptional administrative skills and integrity. He managed the household affairs so effectively that Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Genesis 39:6. This level of trust highlights Joseph's dedication and the blessings that followed his faithfulness. However, Joseph's integrity was soon put to a severe test. Potiphar's wife took notice of Joseph's handsome appearance and tried to seduce him. Day after day, she urged him to lie with her, but Joseph refused. He said to her, "With me in charge, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Genesis 39:8-9. Joseph's response is a powerful testament to his integrity and his unwavering commitment to God. He recognized that yielding to her advances would be a great sin, not only against Potiphar, but, more importantly, against God. This strong moral stance exemplifies Joseph's deep-rooted faith and his understanding of what it means to live righteously. Despite his consistent refusals, Potiphar's wife continued her attempts to seduce Joseph. One day, when none of the household servants were inside, she caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But Joseph left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. Genesis 39:11-12. His immediate flight from temptation reflects the wisdom found in 1 Corinthians 6:18, "Flee from sexual immorality." Furious at his rejection, Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph of trying to assault her. She called her household servants and told them, "Look, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed." Genesis 39:14. When Potiphar returned home, she repeated her false accusation, showing him Joseph's cloak as supposed evidence of his wrongdoing. Upon hearing his wife's accusation, Potiphar was enraged and had Joseph thrown into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. Genesis 39:19-20. This turn of events was a severe blow to Joseph, yet even in this dark and unjust situation, he remained steadfast in his faith and integrity. Joseph's integrity, even when falsely accused and imprisoned, is a powerful lesson for us. It teaches us the importance of maintaining our moral principles and faithfulness to God, regardless of the cost. Colossians 3:23-24 encourages us, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving." In the face of trials and temptations, Joseph's unwavering integrity and faithfulness to God serve as a powerful example. His story reminds us that God's presence and favor are with us even in the most challenging circumstances, and that our faithfulness to him will ultimately be rewarded. Joseph's time in prison is a profound lesson in perseverance. Falsely accused and unjustly imprisoned, Joseph did not succumb to despair. Instead, he continued to trust in God and serve faithfully even in the darkest of circumstances. Genesis 39:20-21 tells us, "But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden." Despite his unjust imprisonment, Joseph experienced God's presence and favor. This is a powerful reminder that God is with us even in our most difficult times. Joseph's character and trust in God shone brightly even in the prison. The warden quickly recognized Joseph's capabilities and integrity, putting him in charge of all the prisoners and the daily operations of the prison. Genesis 39:22-23 states, "So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did." Even in the bleak confines of the prison, Joseph's leadership and administrative skills were evident. He managed the prison affairs diligently, earning the respect and trust of the warden and the prisoners. Joseph's faithfulness in small things prepared him for greater responsibilities. During his time in prison, Joseph's God-given gift of interpreting dreams came to light once again. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker were also imprisoned, each having a troubling dream on the same night. They were distressed because there was no one to interpret their dreams. Joseph noticed their distress and offered to help, saying, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Genesis 48. The chief cupbearer shared his dream first. "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." Genesis 49:11. Joseph, guided by God, interpreted the dream. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. Genesis 40:12-13. Encouraged by the favorable interpretation, the chief baker shared his dream. "On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Genesis 40:16-17. Joseph interpreted the dream, saying, "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Genesis 40:18-19. 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, both interpretations came true. The chief cupbearer was restored to his position, while the chief baker was executed. Despite the accuracy of his interpretations, the chief cupbearer forgot about Joseph, leaving him in prison. Genesis 40:23 poignantly notes, "The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him." This prolonged period of waiting could have led Joseph to despair, but he continued to trust in God's timing. He remained faithful and diligent, persevering through adversity. James 1:2-4 encourages us. "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Joseph's perseverance in the face of trials and injustices teaches us a crucial lesson about faith and trust. When we face challenges and hardships, we must hold on to our faith and continue to serve God faithfully. Joseph's story reminds us that God's presence is with us even in our darkest moments, and that He is working all things for our good. In the midst of trials, it can be difficult to see God's hand at work. Yet Joseph's perseverance and unwavering faith encourage us to trust in God's plan and timing. His story teaches us that perseverance through adversity strengthens our character and deepens our faith. Joseph's life is a powerful example of how to persevere with faith and integrity, regardless of our circumstances. His unwavering trust in God's plan and his steadfastness in the face of adversity serve as a beacon of hope and inspiration for us all. Joseph's rise to power is a profound demonstration of God's perfect timing and sovereignty. After interpreting the dreams of Pharaoh's officials in prison, 2 years passed before Joseph was called upon to interpret Pharaoh's own troubling dreams. This period of waiting, though difficult, was crucial for God's plan to unfold. In Genesis 41, we read about Pharaoh's disturbing dreams. He dreamt of 7 fat, healthy cows that were devoured by 7 lean, ugly cows, and 7 healthy heads of grain that were swallowed by 7 thin, scorched heads of grain. Pharaoh's wise men and magicians could not interpret these dreams, leaving Pharaoh deeply troubled. It was then that the chief cupbearer remembered Joseph. In Genesis 41:9-13, the cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled." Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. After being quickly cleaned up and brought before Pharaoh, Joseph listened to the dreams. Genesis 41:15-16 recounts, "Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I had a dream and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it.' 'I cannot do it,' Joseph replied to Pharaoh, 'but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires.' Joseph humbly acknowledged that his ability to interpret dreams came from God. Joseph interpreted the dreams, revealing that the 7 healthy cows and 7 healthy heads of grain represented 7 years of great abundance in Egypt, while the 7 lean cows and 7 thin heads of grain symbolized 7 years of severe famine that would follow. Genesis 41:28-30 explains, "It is just as I said to Pharaoh, God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land." Joseph's interpretation did not end with just explaining the dreams. He also offered wise counsel on how to prepare for the coming years of famine. He advised Pharaoh to appoint a discerning and wise man to oversee the land of Egypt, to collect and store surplus grain during the 7 years of abundance. Genesis 41:34-36 states, "Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine." Pharaoh and all his officials found Joseph's plan to be wise and sound. Impressed by his wisdom and discernment, Pharaoh appointed Joseph as second in command over all of Egypt. Genesis 41:39. 41 records Pharaoh's words. "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath-Paneah and placed him in charge of all the land of Egypt. Joseph's rise to power was swift and dramatic, a clear indication of God's sovereignty and perfect timing. From a prisoner to a ruler, Joseph's journey highlights how God's plans unfold in his time and for his purposes. This dramatic change in Joseph's circumstances teaches us to trust in God's timing. Romans 8:28 reassures us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Joseph's story reminds us that even when we face delays and challenges, God is always in control, orchestrating events for our good and his glory. Joseph's rise to power is a testament to God's faithfulness and sovereignty. It encourages us to remain patient and trust in God's timing, knowing that he is working behind the scenes to bring about his plans. No matter how long the wait or how difficult the journey, God's timing is always perfect, and his plans are always for our ultimate good. One of the most powerful lessons from Joseph's life is the importance of forgiveness and reconciliation. When Joseph's brothers came to Egypt seeking food during the famine, they did not recognize him. Despite the pain they had caused him, Joseph chose the path of forgiveness, demonstrating profound grace and compassion. In Genesis 42, we see the beginning of this process. Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt to buy grain because the famine was severe in Canaan. When they arrived, they bowed down to Joseph, fulfilling the dreams he had as a young man. Genesis 42:6-7 says, "Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them." Joseph's initial reaction was to test his brothers to see if they had changed. He accused them of being spies and demanded that they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, to prove their honesty. Joseph's tests were not out of malice, but rather to discern the true state of their hearts. He needed to know if they had repented for their past actions. After imprisoning them for 3 days, Joseph released his brothers, keeping Simeon as a hostage, and sent the rest back to Canaan with grain and their money secretly returned in their sacks. The brothers were filled with fear and guilt, believing that their misfortune was a punishment for their treatment of Joseph. Genesis 42:21-22 captures their remorse. They said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on us." Reuben replied, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." When the brothers returned to Canaan and told their father, Jacob, what had happened, he was distressed at the thought of losing another son. However, the famine persisted, and they were forced to return to Egypt with Benjamin to buy more grain. Genesis 43:11-13 recounts Jacob's reluctant decision. Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags, and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm and a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, and go back to the man at once." When they arrived in Egypt, Joseph saw Benjamin and was deeply moved. He invited his brothers to dine with him, seating them according to their birth order, which puzzled them greatly. During the meal, Joseph's emotions were evident, but he continued to test them, sending them back with grain and secretly placing his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. When they were accused of theft and brought back to Joseph, Judah pleaded on behalf of Benjamin, offering himself as a substitute. Genesis 44:33-34 captures Judah's heartfelt plea. "Now then, please let your servant remain here as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father." Moved by Judah's selflessness and seeing the change in his brothers, Joseph could no longer contain his emotions. He revealed his identity to them, saying, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers were terrified, but Joseph reassured them. Genesis 45:4-5 records his words. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Joseph's forgiveness was genuine and complete. He saw God's hand in his journey, recognizing that his suffering had a greater purpose. This profound understanding allowed him to forgive his brothers fully. Ephesians 4:32 instructs us, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you." Joseph's story is a powerful example of this biblical principle. Through forgiveness and reconciliation, Joseph was able to bring his family together and ensure their survival during the famine. He sent his brothers back to Canaan to bring their father Jacob and all their families to Egypt, where they would be provided for. The reunion with his father was deeply emotional, marking a moment of restoration and healing. Genesis 46:29-30 describes their meeting. Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Joseph's actions demonstrate the power of forgiveness to heal and restore relationships. His willingness to forgive his brothers and reconcile with them brought healing to his family and fulfilled God's greater purposes. As believers, we are called to follow Joseph's example, extending forgiveness and seeking reconciliation in our own lives. Joseph's story teaches us that forgiveness is not only a path to personal peace, but also a reflection of God's grace and mercy. Through forgiveness, we can experience healing, restoration, and the fulfillment of God's plans for our lives and relationships. Joseph's life is a powerful reminder that God is always at work, even in our darkest moments. His story encourages us to trust in God's plan, remain steadfast in our faith, and embrace forgiveness. Through the trials, betrayal, and triumphs, Joseph's unwavering faith and resilience serve as an inspiration for us all. As we close this chapter of our study, I want to ask you, do you sometimes feel a void in your spiritual life despite your efforts? Do you wonder how to draw closer to God amid daily demands? The journey to a deeper spiritual connection is closer than you think. In the comments, you'll find a link to our ebook, 30 Habits to Draw Closer to God. This practical guide, born out of deep research and spiritual experiences, is designed to help you strengthen your relationship with God in a meaningful and lasting way. Imagine adopting habits that not only transform your routine, but also enrich your spiritual life. Think of the peace and fulfillment of living each day in alignment with divine teachings. This ebook offers a clear and accessible path to renew your faith and find purpose. Join those who are experiencing a fuller and more rewarding life through simple yet powerful habits. The spiritual transformation you seek is within your reach. Check it out now in the comments and start your journey toward a deeper connection with God. Remember, a vibrant and true spiritual life is not a distant dream. With 30 habits to draw closer to God, you are one step closer to making it a reality. Begin today to write your new story of faith and devotion. Thank you for joining us in this biblical study. May God bless you and keep you always. And don't forget to check out our previous video, My Name is Joseph and This is My Story, for a more personal perspective on Joseph's incredible journey. The link is in the description below.